Well, thank you very much, Governor, for being with us today. We don't see you near as much as we used to when you were in Congress, but
well, it's nice to be with you, Calvin. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. A couple things that are ongoing with the legislative session that I know is of concern to people, especially in the Dalton area in northwest Georgia. Maybe you can bring us up to date on kind of where things are, because it's a very complicated process that most people don't understand. We've got the sales tax on energy for manufacturing that's being discussed. Such a heavy manufacturing area in our community. I know that was not a bill that was subject to the crossover that just occurred this week, but where do things stand, and what do you hope will happen on that issue before this session is over?
Well, that was one of the primary recommendations of what we call the competitiveness initiative that we started last year. A group of business people that we appointed from all over the state held town hall type meetings in all 12 regions of the state and asked people, what do you think we need to do to make Georgia more competitive? Very close to the top of that was the recommendation that we remove sales tax from energy used for manufacturing. It is something that many of our competitor states do not charge, and we are very, very hopeful we're going to be able to sign that into law this year. It is part of a tax reform package that is working its way through right now. It was not a traditional bill in that it will become part of the recommendations of the Tax Reform Council that was created a couple of years ago. So the procedure is a little different, but the bill is moving, and we're very hopeful it's going to be finalized.
Would you hope that this is an immediate thing, or is it going to be like phased in that you would, what would you like to see that's fair to all?
Obviously, we'd like to have it as soon as possible, but the reality is that there is revenue that is lost both to the state and to local jurisdictions, because it is sales tax and local jurisdictions have a part in that. We do think it will be phased in. We have tried to keep it as short a phase-in period as possible, and a little bit too quick now to say exactly what that period is going to be, but we would hope that it would be somewhere in the 3 to 5 year phase-out period.
Water is another subject that's been ongoing for years. You've dealt with it in Congress and now as governor. I know there's negotiations ongoing with other states that are critical to what the final decision might be, but Northwest Georgia in particular, the industry there is very indicative of, it uses a lot of water for everything they do, and having available water is very important to our area. I know every time the subject comes up, it always seems to be about Metro Atlanta water or Lake Lanier, but what can you tell us? Where are we at now, or what can be made public, so to speak, as where we are in this whole water issue that's so critical to Georgia as a whole?
Well, first of all, we have been very fortunate, of course, last year to receive a favorable ruling from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals that overruled the prior ruling that Judge Magnuson had put in place. It quite frankly helped Georgia substantially in our negotiations with Alabama and Florida. And I am continuing negotiations with both of those states, and we are encouraged that we're making progress and are hopeful that in the not too distant future we will be able to reach a reconciliation with the other two states. But early on I realized that we can't continue to depend so heavily on federally controlled reservoirs such as Lake Lanier for water supply for the state of Georgia. So I initiated a process where over the 4 years of my term we will set aside up to $300 million in bond money for local jurisdictions to be able to do a number of things, either build reservoirs or in some cases deep wells, in some cases maybe even aquifer storage where that's appropriate. I think the point is we've got to become more self-sufficient in Georgia. We have adequate rainfall, we just don't have the capacity to capture it and to store it for the times that we need, and that's what we're working on.
How does Tennessee possibly figure into all this? Is it too early to talk about the water there, how it might benefit especially Northwest Georgia and the metro area too?
Well, you know, as I understand it, the Dalton utility, for example, already purchases water out of the Tennessee River, and that's a good start. Obviously, there are some who would say we need to fight about where the state line is and that would give us access to the Tennessee River. We've had a water war with two states going on for now over 2 decades. I'm not quite honestly willing to start another one. I think there are negotiating tools available to us, and we will pursue those at the appropriate time. Quite frankly, the reservoirs and the water basins that we have in the state of Georgia are varied, and they're very different one to the other. The one that's received the most attention, of course, is the ACF, the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint, which is the main one, goes through Lake Lanier and becomes the border between Alabama and Georgia as we go south. The ACT, which is the one that affects a good bit of northwest Georgia, the Alabama-Coosa-Tallapoosa Basin, is the one that primarily involves Georgia and Alabama. And there has been litigation ongoing as to both of those major river basins. So, and they are different. The solutions to the problems in each of them are somewhat different. But I'm encouraged. I think we're gonna see that we're making real progress.
A final question. I know drug courts are a subject. We've seen a lot of write-ups this week in the AJC. Next week in Dalton, we have the 10th anniversary of the Whitfield County Drug Courts. Have been very successful there. I think I remember from looking at your budget, you're proposing an increase in money for drug courts. Is that a main part of this whole criminal justice reform that's going on this year?
It is. We started the Criminal Justice Council, Reform Council last year. They met last year, made recommendations, and those recommendations are now being put into legislative format, and we're hopeful that we will have a package that encompasses many of their recommendations this year. And a major part of that is the drug courts, or accountability courts as they're referred to, because it can take many manifestations. It can be mental health courts. In some areas, veterans courts have become a popular thing, because we do know that a substantial portion of the people who are in trouble now are veterans for a variety of different reasons, because of addictions or mental health issues. Mental health courts are another manifestation of accountability courts. We put $10 million in our budget recommendations. We believe the General Assembly is going to keep that, and the indications are up to this point they have kept that in the budget. So that will allow us to form even more of those accountability courts around the state of Georgia. It is not the end of everything, but it is certainly a good start. We know they work. Right now, for people who get out of our state prisons, within 3 years, 1 out of every 3 will be back in our prison system. We've got to do better than that. And criminal justice reform encompasses many other reforms to try to minimize the cost to the taxpayer and at the same time break the addictions, which are the primary reason that many people wind up in our criminal justice system in the first place. So I'm encouraged by that too. I think the legislation looks very good.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Captain.